The rain didn't fall, it whispered. It slid down the edge of my umbrella, dripping onto the wet soil that would soon cover Ernest forever. My hands clutched the handle tight, knuckles pale and trembling. "Mom, you should stand back," Charles murmured beside me. His tone was soft, polite, almost distant. "I'm fine," I said, though my voice cracked. He wouldn't want me far. Henry's gaze stayed fixed on the coffin, jaw tense, face unreadable. "It's over now, Mom. You need to let go." Let go. How could I let go of the man who'd been my world for 42 years? I wanted to say something, anything, but the priest's words blurred together with the soft patter of rain. My heart felt numb, my thoughts foggy. Then, just as they began lowering Ernest's coffin, my purse buzzed. It was a faint vibration at first, one I almost ignored. But something made me look. The message glowed on my phone screen. "I am still alive. Trust no one." My breath caught. For a moment, I thought I was seeing things. I blinked hard, but the words didn't vanish. I almost dropped the phone. My heart thudded painfully, so loud I was sure everyone could hear it. The funeral director was saying something about paperwork, and my sons stepped forward to sign. I watched them, hands trembling. Could it be a mistake? A cruel prank? No one else had access to Ernest's number. Charles turned slightly, noticing my frozen stare. "Mom, are you okay?" Yes, I just..." "It's nothing," I whispered. I slipped the phone back into my purse, forcing my lips to form a weak smile. "Just a notification." Henry frowned. "You shouldn't be checking your phone here, Mom." His voice was sharp, impatient, not grief-stricken, not gentle. "Just cold." "I wasn't," I murmured, eyes on the ground. When the last handful of soil hit the coffin, the sound echoed inside me like a closing door. I wanted to cry but couldn't. Every emotion had turned to confusion. People approached with condolences, neighbors, old friends, co-workers, voices blending into one blur of sympathy. I nodded, smiled when I had to, but my mind was still trapped on that message. "I'm still alive." The words burned through me. After the guests began to leave, Charles and Henry walked over to the funeral director, speaking in hushed tones about insurance, signatures, and the next steps. "Insurance? That quickly?" I stood by the grave, staring down at the flowers, when Mrs. Connors, our neighbor, touched my arm. "He was such a good man, Margot." "I'm so sorry." "Thank you," I said quietly. "He was." She looked over at my sons. "They're handling things well, aren't they?" "So composed." "Yes," I said, forcing a small smile. "Too composed, maybe." Her brows knitted. "Grief shows differently for everyone." "Maybe." But as I watched my sons, I felt something I'd never felt before. Distance. Cold, uncomfortable distance. When we finally got to the car, the rain had softened to a drizzle. Charles opened the back door for me. "We'll drive you home, Mom." "I can manage," I replied, but he shook his head. "You shouldn't be alone today," Henry added. Their words were right. Their eyes weren't. The drive home was silent. Just the hum of the tires on wet pavement. Halfway there, I found the courage to speak. "Did your father ever mention changing his insurance policy?" Charles glanced in the rearview mirror. "No, why?" "Just wondering. The director said something about the paperwork being handled already." "That's normal," he said quickly. "Dad was organized." Henry nodded. "You know how he was about planning ahead." I looked at their reflections in the window, calm, even smiling faintly. My stomach turned. When we pulled into the driveway, the porch light flickered. It had been Ernest's habit to fix every flicker immediately. I stepped out and stared at that light for a long time before following them inside. The house smelled faintly of cedar and coffee. Ernest's scent still lingered. His coat hung by the door, his glasses resting on the counter. Everything looked alive. But he wasn't, or was he? Charles placed his umbrella by the wall. "We'll stay tonight, Mom, just to make sure you're all right." I nodded, though a part of me screamed for solitude. "I appreciate it," I said softly. They went upstairs, talking quietly. I stood in the living room, my pulse still racing. Then I took out my phone again. The message sat there, unchanged. No number, just unknown. I pressed call. The line rang once, then silence. No voice, no tone. Just an abrupt click. I sank onto the couch, gripping the phone tight. Could Ernest be alive somehow? It was impossible. I saw his body. I touched his cold hand at the viewing. And yet that message had felt like him. Short, precise, protective. I whispered into the quiet, "Ernest, what are you trying to tell me?" The house didn't answer. Just the faint tick of the grandfather clock. A floorboard creaked upstairs. My head jerked up. I told myself it was one of the boys moving around, but something about the sound, slow, deliberate, made my heart thump harder. A minute later, Charles called down, "Mom, do you want some tea?" His voice was even, polite again. "Yes, please," I said, trying to steady my breathing. When he came down, carrying 2 cups, I noticed his hands shaking slightly. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah," he said quickly. "Just tired." He set the cup down, eyes flicking briefly to my purse on the sofa. "You got a message earlier, didn't you?" "During the funeral." My stomach dropped. "What makes you say that?" He shrugged. "I saw you look at your phone. Thought maybe someone texted condolences." "Oh, yes, maybe." He studied me a second longer, then smiled. A thin, strained smile. "You should try to sleep." "I will," I said, forcing calm. He turned toward the stairs. "Good night, Mom. Good night." As soon as he disappeared, I checked my phone again. The message timestamp blinked. 2:37 p.m., the exact moment they lowered Ernest's coffin. I couldn't breathe for a second. My thoughts raced. Was someone mocking me? Was it blackmail? Or something darker? I looked toward the staircase where shadows gathered and a chill ran through me. Maybe the message wasn't from Ernest. Maybe it was a warning, and I just hadn't understood it yet. That night I didn't sleep. I lay awake, listening to every creak, every soft whisper of movement. When I finally closed my eyes, all I could see was that single line glowing on my screen. "I am still alive. Trust no one." And the way Henry had glanced at me at the graveside, half smirk, half suspicion, as if he already knew what I'd read. The next morning, the air still smelled faintly of rain and roses from the funeral. I hadn't slept. That message haunted me. I am still alive. Trust no one. It looped in my mind like a whisper that refused to fade. I decided to visit the workshop. Ernest had spent half his life in that small wooden building behind our house, fixing clocks, building furniture, repairing radios no one else could save. It had been his sanctuary. When I reached the door, a yellow police seal stretched across it. But curiosity, or maybe grief, overpowered me. I tore the tape off and stepped inside. Everything was spotless, not just clean or scrubbed. The floor gleamed. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant, not smoke. The walls were intact, the ceiling untouched. No scorch marks, no melted wiring, nothing. My voice came out in a whisper. "This doesn't look like an explosion site." I turned slowly, scanning the workbench. Ernest's favorite hammer was missing. His old blue notebook, too. Even the shelves looked rearranged. Footsteps crunched on the gravel outside. I turned sharply. Charles and Henry were walking toward me. "Mom," Charles called, his tone sharp. "You shouldn't be here." "Why not?" I asked, stepping back from the bench. "This was your father's place." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Because it's not safe. The police said the wiring caused the blast. The whole structure's unstable." I looked around. "Unstable? It looks cleaner than our kitchen." Henry frowned. "They cleaned it up, Mom, for the investigation." "Who cleaned it?" I asked. He hesitated. "The insurance people, I guess." The word hit me like a cold drop of water. "Insurance? Already?" Henry shrugged. "They called us yesterday. Said they'd send someone to evaluate the claim." "The claim?" I repeated. "Your father's body isn't even cold and you're talking about claims?" Charles's voice hardened. "Mom, we're just trying to make sure you're taken care of. Dad would want that." "I can take care of myself," I said quietly. "What I want is the truth." They exchanged a quick look, one I almost missed. Charles broke the silence first. "There's nothing more to see here. Let's go home." I took a step toward the tool cabinet. "I just want to take a few of your father's things. His notebook, maybe his tools." Charles moved quickly, placing his hand on the cabinet handle. "They're damaged beyond use," he said, eyes avoiding mine. I reached past him and tugged at the handle. It didn't move. Locked. "Damaged?" I whispered. "Then why lock it?" Henry sighed loudly. "Mom, please, don't make this harder." I stared at both of them. Harder for who? For a long moment, no one spoke. Only the faint hum of a distant car filled the silence. Charles's jaw clenched. "We're going now." I followed them out slowly, my chest heavy. When I turned back, I noticed something. A small patch of dirt near the wall that looked freshly disturbed. Someone had buried something there. But before I could move, Henry slammed the door shut behind me. Back in the car, no one spoke. I could feel tension pressing against the silence like static in the air. When we reached home, I walked straight to my room and locked the door. My hands shook as I opened my purse and pulled out my phone. The message still glowed on the screen. I am still alive. Trust no one. My fingers hovered over the call button. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I pressed it. It rang once, then silence. A click. Disconnected. I stared at the screen, breathless. It had been his number, Ernest's. The one I'd memorized decades ago. Could he be alive? The thought scared me more than it comforted me. If he was alive, why not come home? Why the message? Why hide? Downstairs I heard my sons talking in hushed voices. Their words floated up the staircase. Charles's voice, low, firm. She's starting to ask questions. Henry's reply, sharper. Then we need to be careful. She's not stupid. My heart froze. Careful about what? I leaned closer to the door, listening. She'll calm down, Charles said. She's grieving. We just need to keep things simple until everything clears. Everything clears. Those words felt wrong, like they were waiting for something to end. I sat down on the edge of my bed, tears blurring my eyes. Ernest had trusted them, loved them. So had I, and yet now, something was deeply, painfully wrong. Later that evening, I found the courage to bring it up. Charles was in the living room, typing on his laptop. Henry scrolled through his phone. I stood in the doorway, trying to sound steady. I went over the police report again, I began. They said the cause was faulty wiring, but I saw no damage. Henry didn't look up. You're reading too much into it, Mom. I'm reading what's written, I said. There's supposed to be burn marks, melted tools, something. There was nothing. Charles exhaled loudly. Mom, you have to stop torturing yourself. Dad's gone. You're just seeing things that aren't there. I'm seeing what is there, I snapped. And what's there doesn't make sense. Henry put his phone down finally. You think someone killed him? The question came out almost like a taunt. I hesitated. I don't know. But I think someone's lying. Charles's eyes darkened. About what? I don't know yet, I said softly. But I'll find out. A long silence followed. Charles closed his laptop, stood up, and gave me a forced smile. Maybe you should get some rest, Mom. You're tired. I'm not tired, I said. Then you should be, he muttered. That night I couldn't eat. I sat in Ernest's chair, staring at the empty fireplace. I kept hearing his voice, calm, steady, full of warmth. If anything ever happens to me, Margot, just trust your instincts. I had brushed off that line before. Now it echoed like a warning. At midnight, I slipped out of the house with a flashlight and walked back to the workshop. The gravel crunched under my shoes, the cold air biting at my hands. When I reached the spot I'd noticed earlier, I knelt down and brushed the dirt away. My fingers hit something solid, metal. I pulled it out slowly. It was one of Ernest's toolboxes, locked. The initials EM were engraved on the lid. My pulse raced. I didn't have the key. But I knew this wasn't supposed to be buried. Someone wanted it hidden. I stood up, wiping my hands on my coat, and glanced back toward the house. One of the upstairs lights flicked on, Charles's room. He was watching me. For a long second, our eyes met through the distance. Then the light went off again. I froze where I stood, the cold digging into my bones. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't tell what scared me more, the idea that my husband might be alive, or that my sons already knew the truth. Whatever happened in that workshop wasn't an accident, and I had a feeling the next message I received would tell me exactly why. The mail felt heavier these days, envelopes I didn't recognize, statements I wasn't expecting. I opened one at the kitchen table, and the numbers made my stomach drop. You looked at that already? No, not yet. I thought they said it was all sorted. They said a lot of things. I set the letter down and tried to breathe. The payout notice was on top, a glossy letter from the insurance company saying the claim was approved. 48 hours, 2 days. It still felt obscene. They approved it fast, I said. That's good. It means we can handle everything. Everything? The word sounded thin. Like what? Like repairs? Like funeral costs? You don't have to worry, he said. We'll take care of it. He said it like a promise, short and tidy. But I'd watched him drive away in a new car 2 nights before. Not a polite used one. A shiny black sedan with a dealer tag. It sat in his driveway like an announcement. You got a new car? I asked that evening, trying to sound casual. It's leased. For work. For work? The answer had a practiced ring. "Since when does your job need that?" He shrugged. "It's business, Mom. You wouldn't get it." "You should tell me these things," I said. "I lived with your father for years. We planned together." "We're planning," he said, softer now. "Relax, okay?" Relax. The word felt impossible. There were little things that kept crowding in. A utility bill stamped paid, though I hadn't seen any record. A credit card charge I didn't recognize. Bank withdrawals scheduled the day after the funeral. Numbers that didn't match the man I'd been married to. "You've been looking through his ledger?" Charles asked one afternoon, standing in the doorway with his hands shoved in his pockets. He sounded annoyed, not caring. "I found it in the study," I told him. He kept everything. Every small repair, every payment. "There's a page torn out." "Torn out?" He blinked like it was a small thing. He tore pages sometimes. He liked to take notes and throw them away. "He wouldn't have torn that page," I said, and my voice trembled. "This was last week." The writing stops mid-sentence. Maybe he got distracted. Henry laughed, but it was the wrong kind of laugh. Old men forget their pens. He wrote, "If anything happens to me, check." And then it ended, I said, putting the ledger on the table so they could see the ragged edge. Charles reached out, fingers hovering over the torn margin. Maybe he meant to finish it later. "He didn't get the chance," I said. "So he left a note and someone—" I swallowed. "Someone must have taken it." Henry clicked his tongue. "You're thinking too much, Mom." "That's what grief does," I said. "It makes you see patterns." "No, it's not grief," I replied, louder than I meant. "You and Henry are treating everything like a business transaction." "We are a business." Dad knew that. Charles's jaw tightened. "You should rest." "I can rest when I trust things again," I said. "Right now, I don't trust the numbers in my own house." He looked at me then, really looked, and for a second the brother I knew flickered through, the one who'd once brought home repair parts on his bicycle. But the look was gone quickly, replaced by the man who signed papers and smiled for bankers. "You keep saying that," he said. "Trust no one. What are you trying to prove?" I didn't answer right away. I thought of Ernest's careful handwriting, the way he crossed his T's, the small notes about parts and dates. He had been meticulous. He would have written down anything he thought mattered. "He used to write down changes to the policy," I said finally. "I remember him mentioning an extra clause months ago. He told me he'd been worried about something." "Worried about what?" Henry asked, folding his arms. He sounded impatient. "We paid his bills. We handled the shop." "You handled some of it," I said. "But he did the rest alone. He kept secrets from all of us." "You're making accusations," Charles said. "That's not fair." "You're right," I said. "It's not fair. But it's true." The house felt too small after that, as if the walls had moved in. I found myself watching their faces like a neighbor watches storm clouds, trying to read the weather. One night, I sat with the ledger under the lamp and traced Ernest's handwriting with my finger. I read the same line until the letters blurred, until my eyes wanted to close. When I folded the page back into the book, something fell out. A small receipt folded neat as a coin. I opened it with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. "It's a bank withdrawal," I whispered. 3,000. 2 days before the accident. "That could be anything," Henry said when I showed it to them. "Maybe he paid someone." "He paid cash," I said. "But to who?" Charles looked away. "Maybe to a supplier." "Or to you," I muttered, and the silence that followed felt like an accusation thrown against the wall. They left the room like a breeze, doors closing behind them. Alone, I let myself think the worst. Not because I wanted to, but because the ledger with its torn sentence yanked at me until I followed. That night I dreamed Ernest's voice clear and close. "Margot, don't trust them," he said. The same low, steady tone I'd loved for years. It woke me standing in the dark, heart pounding like a trapped bird. The dream was not comfort. It was a charge. I decided to check the accounts myself. I sat at the kitchen table with the online bank statements open, the numbers a landscape of ledgers and transfers. I matched dates to receipts. The withdrawals didn't line up with purchases. A deposit showed up and then disappeared. A transfer to a numbered account I didn't recognize. "So?" Charles had asked when I mentioned the missing pages. "You think they took money?" "Not they," I told him. "I think someone did. Maybe for debt. Maybe because they were desperate." "You'll cause trouble," Henry warned. "People talk." "Good," I said. "Let them talk." He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Mom, listen," I said, and for a moment my voice was steady. If Ernest left a note, if he wrote, "If anything happens to me, check," then he knew. He knew something was wrong. I won't let it go. They exchanged a look, shorter this time, but sharper. I felt it like a cut. Their faces were calm, but their eyes were guarded. I had stepped into a room I couldn't leave politely. "Just be careful," Charles said finally, softer. "For your sake? For my sake?" I repeated, watching him pack his laptop into a briefcase. "You should have thought about that before." "I did think about it," he said. "We all did." "Then what did you do?" I asked. "What did you do about it?" He didn't answer. He couldn't answer. The ledger lay open between us like a small, accusing thing. That night, alone with the lamp and the papers, I promised myself I'd find the missing line. I would follow the money if I had to. I would read every name, every transfer. I would not let the torn sentence be the last thing he wrote. I slept little. In the small hours, my phone lit up with a memory of his voice, as if he'd whispered it from the past. "If anything happens, check." And then, in my head, the rest of the sentence refused to exist. The lamp snapped on like a small promise. I remember the light spilling across the portrait above the fireplace. Ernest in his work shirt, grin crooked, hands stained with varnish. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. "Again?" "I thought you turned it off." "Not this time." They sounded distant, tired. I picked up the phone with shaking fingers. The message read, "They're lying. Find the key behind the picture frame." That can't be real. Who would? Read it again. I read it until the words looked like someone else's handwriting. My heart knocked so hard I thought it would wake the house. "You okay? Do you see this?" "I see something." I stood, walked to the fireplace and touched the frame. It was heavier than I remembered. Ernest had hung it for our anniversary. He always said portraits made a house a home. I pried at the edge and felt tape. "It's taped," I said, breath short. "Don't, shh, just let me." My nails pulled the tape away, and tucked behind the backing was a small metal key. It was dull with age but warm from my hands. I held it to the lamp like it might glow. "You found something?" "Yes." "Bring it down." I carried it to the study like it was a fragile bird. The room smelled faintly of old paper and lemon oil. Ernest's desk sat neat, as if waiting for him to come back at any second. I tried every drawer and cabinet until one clicked under the key. "You did it," Charles said from the doorway. His voice had an edge I couldn't place. "I opened it," I said. "There's an envelope, my name." "You should leave it sealed." I think he wanted me to read it. "Mom," Henry started, then stopped. He looked like a man trying to choose the right shirt for a funeral. I slit the envelope with the corner of my fingernail. A folded page slipped out. Ernest's handwriting curved across the top. "If you're reading this, Margot, they've done it." "You wrote this?" "No," I said. My voice trembled. "He wrote this. I don't like where this is going." "He wrote that he was worried," I read aloud, though the words were already inside my head. "He said he found altered signatures and unusual withdrawals. He said he hired a private investigator, Victor Lane." "Victor who?" "Victor Lane. He said to trust him, to give him the flash drive if anything happened." "A flash drive?" Charles glanced at the desk, then at the bookshelf. "Dad used a flash drive?" "He kept everything simple," I said. "But he recorded conversations. He said he was afraid." "Afraid of what?" Henry asked. "Afraid of money problems? This is getting ridiculous." He wrote that he overheard talk about making the accident look real. "That's..." Charles's hand tightened on the desk until the knuckles whitened. "That's impossible." "Is it?" I asked. He wrote it. "I think you should stop reading that," Henry said. "It's upsetting you." "It's upsetting all of us," I said. He didn't trust them. "I don't trust this," Charles snapped. "You shouldn't be poking around." "Then who will?" I asked. "You and Henry?" Charles looked away. He said nothing. Henry shifted his weight like he wanted to be somewhere else. "He left instructions," I continued. "If anything happened, find Victor Lane, give him the drive. He promised to protect us." "You're saying Dad planned for this?" Henry's laugh was small and brittle. "Planned for his own death?" "He planned for trouble," I said. "He was worried enough to record things. He wanted someone to be there if something happened." "Recordings?" Charles echoed. "What recordings?" "Conversations. He mentioned voices. He mentioned names." A long pause settled over the room. The lamp hummed. Outside, a car passed and the headlights painted the curtains. "This sounds like a novel," Henry said finally. "Dad wasn't a spy." "He was cautious," I said. "He worried about debts, about signatures changed. He wrote about insurance. He wrote, 'If you can't trust your sons, trust the papers.'" Charles flinched as if struck. "Where did he put the drive?" "He said if anything happened, it would be in the toolbox he always kept locked." "You found the key behind the picture frame," Charles said slowly. So maybe he left a trail for me," I finished. "For us. You can't go around accusing them," Henry warned. "You'll tear the family apart." "I don't want to tear anyone apart," I said. "I want to know what happened to my husband." "You don't know what you're asking for," Charles said, softer. "This could ruin everything." I felt old then, smaller than the papers, as if every secret had weight and I had to lift it alone. Ernest's handwriting stared back at me from the page, patient and exact. "If you're reading this, Margot, they've done it. Where's Victor?" Henry demanded. "How do we find him?" "There's an address," I said, reading from the note. "A town 2 hours away? He's a private investigator, small office." Ernest left his number. Charles ran a hand over his face. "You want to call a stranger because Dad was nervous?" "I want to call him because Dad told me to." "You always believed him," Henry said, "even when he was stubborn." "I believed him because he was my husband," I replied, "and because his last words on paper were a warning." Charles paced once, then stopped at the window. "If this is true, if Dad recorded something, downloads, transfers, conversations, then whoever did this covered their tracks." "Which is why Victor," I said. "We need someone who knows how to read those tracks." Henry's tone went flat. "Or we're inviting trouble into our home." "That trouble is already here," I whispered. He left me the key. He wanted me to find this. He trusted somebody. "You sure this wasn't meant to be private?" Charles asked. "Maybe he didn't want us—" "He wanted me," I interrupted, sharper than I meant. "He wanted me to know." The silence that followed tasted like the moment before a storm. My hand still felt the metal of the key. The envelope lay open on the desk like a wound. Ernest's words were simple, direct, enough to push me forward and not let me go. "Call him tomorrow," Charles said finally. "If it helps you sleep." "I'm not sleeping until I know," I said. "Call or don't, I'll go." "You'll go alone?" Henry asked. "I don't need you to come." "You shouldn't go alone." "I was never meant to be alone," I said. "But I don't need you to follow. I need the truth." They both looked at me then, and for the first time I saw hesitation, fear. The men I raised sat like strangers with my husband's notes spread between them. I folded the paper back into the envelope and slid the key into my pocket. The lamplight warmed the edges of the portrait above the fireplace, and Ernest's painted eyes seemed to watch my hands. If Ernest had hired a man named Victor Lane, then that man was the thread I had to pull. If Ernest had recorded proof, then those recordings would answer the question that kept me awake. Who had made sure my husband would never come home? I set the envelope down and said nothing. The quiet in the study grew heavy and full of waiting. The cafe was nearly empty when I arrived. A cracked neon sign buzzed weakly in the window, the smell of burnt coffee thick in the air. I'd never been to that side of town before. Too quiet, too forgotten. I spotted him instantly. A man sitting alone near the back, coat draped neatly over the chair, a small notebook beside his cup. "Mrs. Callahan?" he asked, standing as I approached. His voice was calm, polite, almost too steady. "Yes," I said. "You're Victor Lane?" He nodded, motioning for me to sit. "I'm sorry we're meeting like this. Ernest mentioned you." My hands fidgeted with my purse strap. He said if anything happened, I should find you. He studied me carefully, like he was weighing every word I said. He trusted you completely. The words stung. I swallowed hard. He told you something, didn't he? "Yes. And I think you already know it wasn't an accident." My heart thudded. "Then you know who did it." He sighed, leaning closer. "Your husband came to me 3 weeks before the explosion. He was worried about your sons." "My sons?" I whispered, shaking my head. "No, they'd never—" "He didn't want to believe it either," Victor said softly. "But he'd found things he couldn't ignore." "What things?" He opened his notebook and slid a small flash drive across the table. He said if anything ever happened to him, I was to give this to you. His exact words were, "Margot will know what to do." The tiny metal drive sat between us like something alive. I couldn't bring myself to touch it. What's on it? His recordings, Victor said. He recorded everything in that workshop of his. Conversations, phone calls, even arguments. My stomach tightened. Arguments with who? He met my eyes. Charles and Henry. I felt the world tilt slightly, like gravity had shifted. You're wrong, I whispered. I wish I was. Charles was with him the night before, I said. They were fixing the heater. Henry was out of town. They loved their father. Victor folded his hands, quiet for a moment. Mrs. Callahan, love and greed live closer together than most people think. His words made my throat close. I wanted to leave. I wanted to scream. Instead, I said, how do I know this isn't some cruel setup? You'll have to listen, he said gently. Ernest left proof, and he wanted you to be the one to hear it first. I stared at the flash drive, feeling both dread and duty. Did he say why? Why would they do this? Debt, Victor said flatly. Henry owed a man in the city. Charles had a failing business. Ernest told me they changed his life insurance policy, forged it, doubled the payout in your name, but with their signatures behind it. I felt my body go cold. No, Ernest would have noticed. He did, Victor replied. That's why he came to me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The waitress came by, refilling our coffee, but I couldn't taste anything. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Finally, I asked, what do I do now? Take this home, Victor said, pushing the flash drive toward me. Watch it. Listen to it. Then we talk again tomorrow. I picked it up slowly. It felt heavier than it should have. And if it's true, then we go to the police, he said. But only when you're ready. You can't accuse family without proof. They're my sons, I murmured. If this is real, I don't know if I'll ever be ready. Victor looked at me with something like pity. Sometimes the hardest truth is the one closest to home. He stood and put his hat on. I'll call you tomorrow. Don't tell anyone we met. When he left, the cafe felt emptier than before. The chair he'd sat in still held the ghost of his presence. I finished my cold coffee in silence, staring at the little flash drive like it was ticking. Back home, I sat at Ernest's old desk, the one that still smelled faintly of cedar and oil. The night pressed against the windows, and the only light came from the desk lamp. I plugged in the flash drive. The first file was labeled M. My breath caught as I clicked it open. Ernest's voice filled the room, calm, steady, heartbreakingly familiar. If you're hearing this, Margot, he began, then they've crossed the line. I found the forged signatures and the policy changes. They want it all. My hand went to my mouth. He sounded so alive. I confronted them, Ernest continued. They denied it, but I recorded everything. I know what they're planning. If something happens to me, it won't be an accident. The sound of another voice cut through the recording. My blood froze. Charles, he was angry, sharp. Dad, you're overreacting. It's just paperwork. You're making this hard for everyone. Ernest replied, calm but firm. You changed the policy without my consent. I fixed it. Charles shouted. You never listen. Maybe if you'd retire, none of this would be necessary. Then Henry's voice joined in, lower, almost nervous. We can't go back now. It's already done. There was a long pause. Then Ernest again, voice cracking for the first time. You're talking about killing your own father. Don't be dramatic, Charles snapped. It'll look accidental. You won't feel a thing. The recording ended abruptly. For a few seconds I couldn't move. My heart slammed against my ribs, and tears blurred my vision. I replayed it again and again, hoping I'd heard it wrong, hoping I'd misunderstood. But there was no mistake. It was them, my sons, my boys. I pressed a trembling hand to my mouth to stifle a sob. Oh, Ernest! In that moment, everything in me broke and hardened all at once. The grief turned to fire. I picked up the phone and dialed Victor. He answered on the first ring. You listened, he said quietly. Yes, I whispered. It's them. I heard their voices. Then you know what we're dealing with. I wiped my tears, forcing my voice to stay steady. They murdered him. For money. Victor hesitated. You can't confront them yet. I won't, I said. But they won't get away with this. I'll handle the legal side, he promised. You keep acting normal. Let them think you're still grieving, still fragile. I can do that, I said. I've been doing that since the funeral. He paused. You're brave, Mrs. Callahan. I'm a mother, I said softly. That's different. We agreed to meet again the next evening to plan what came next. I hung up, my hand shaking, and looked around the quiet house. Every photo, every memory now felt poisoned. I went upstairs and stood outside Charles's old room, now spotless, empty, lifeless. The thought of his laughter as a boy, his small hand in mine, made my chest ache. How had it come to this? Downstairs I heard the clock chime midnight. I sat in Ernest's chair again, staring at the glow of the computer screen, replaying that moment when he said, "They want it all." He had known. He had tried to warn me. Now it was my turn to finish what he started. I whispered to the dark, "I'll get you justice, Ernest. No matter what it costs." And in the stillness that followed, I thought I heard his voice again, faint, steady, somewhere deep inside me, telling me to be careful. Pretending felt like breathing through glass. Every day I woke up and put on the same polite smile, the one people mistook for strength. Inside I was breaking piece by piece, but on the outside I looked like a grieving mother learning to move on. At dinner, the three of us sat together, just like old times, except nothing about it felt normal anymore. Charles poured wine into my glass, eyes fixed on the table. "You've been quiet lately, Mom." "I'm fine," I said softly. "Just tired." Henry forced a small laugh. "You should get some rest. You've been through a lot." "I'm managing," I said, cutting a small piece of chicken I couldn't taste. "How's work?" Charles shrugged. "Busy. Lots of paperwork with Dad's estate. Still tying up loose ends." "Loose ends?" I asked. "Like what?" He didn't look up. "Just formalities." Henry leaned back, swirling his drink. "The insurance stuff mostly. We just want everything settled so you don't have to think about it." I smiled faintly. "You two are very efficient." Charles glanced at Henry, then back at me. "You make that sound like a bad thing." "Not at all," I said. "Your father would be proud." He forced a grin, but his eyes flickered, uneasy. I told myself not to push too hard. Victor had warned me. "Patience," he'd said that morning over the phone. "We need evidence that can't be denied. Documents, recordings, anything concrete. Don't let them see you're suspicious." He was right. I couldn't afford to slip, so I kept my mask on. I smiled when they mentioned Ernest. I nodded when they said we should move forward. But inside I was watching, memorizing everything. Charles left his laptop open once, an email half-written. I copied the file to my drive before he noticed. Later, I found bank statements buried in his desk drawer, money being funneled somewhere I didn't recognize. Every detail mattered. At church that Sunday, people approached me with gentle smiles and pity in their eyes. "You're so strong, Margot," Mrs. Connors whispered. "I don't know how you do it." I smiled, said thank you, and folded my hands tightly to stop them from shaking. If only they knew the truth, that I was living under the same roof as the men who had killed my husband. That evening I called Victor again. "I've copied some files," I said quietly. "Emails, transfers, insurance updates. It's all there." "Good," he replied. "We'll analyze them, but don't confront them yet. You're not safe until we have proof strong enough to hold in court." "Proof," I repeated, my voice trembling. "You'll get it. I'll find more." "You've done enough for now," he said. "Please be careful." But I couldn't stop. The more I learned, the more I needed to know. Later that night, as I was tidying the living room, Charles walked in. His tone was oddly casual. "What did Victor want with Dad anyway?" I froze. "What do you mean?" "I found his name in one of Dad's old notes," he said. "Victor Lane. Sound familiar?" I kept my voice steady. "I think he was a client. Your father did repairs for half the town." Charles studied my face, then smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Right, makes sense." He left and I stood there trembling. They were starting to suspect me too. The next afternoon, Henry came home early, his shirt untucked, his breath smelling faintly of whiskey. "You've been busy," he muttered, throwing his keys onto the counter. "Busy?" "Going through Dad's things, spending time on the phone." "I'm trying to keep his memory alive," I said, forcing calm. He smirked. "By calling strangers?" I met his eyes. "You should go lie down, Henry." He stared at me for a moment, then laughed softly. "Sure, Mom, whatever you say." When he left, I sank into a chair, my pulse hammering. They were watching, listening, testing me. That night, when the house finally went quiet, I crept into Charles's study. My hands trembled as I opened the top drawer, the one he always kept locked. Inside, among folders and receipts, something glinted under the lamplight. A gold wedding ring. Ernest's. The engraving inside, M and E forever, was unmistakable. I had asked the police about it weeks ago. They told me it hadn't been found after the explosion. I held it in my palm, cold and heavy. My knees almost gave out. Another lie. I slipped it into my pocket and shut the drawer gently, heart pounding. When I stepped into the hallway, the floor creaked. I froze. A shadow moved down the stairs, slow, deliberate. Charles's voice drifted through the dark. "Mom, what are you doing up?" My throat tightened. "Just getting water." He smiled faintly, though his eyes were sharp. "You should lock your door. The neighborhood isn't what it used to be." "Good night, Charles," I said softly. "Good night," he replied, still watching me. I hurried upstairs, every step feeling heavier than the last. In my room, I locked the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. The ring burned in my pocket like a secret I wasn't ready to hold. I crawled into bed, but sleep wouldn't come. I kept replaying the sound of his footsteps, the look in his eyes, something cold, calculating. Around midnight, I heard it. The faintest click of the doorknob turning, slowly, quietly. I froze under the covers, afraid to breathe. The handle twisted again, then stopped. Silence. After a few seconds, soft footsteps retreated down the hall. I stayed still for what felt like hours, my heart pounding so loud I thought it might give me away. When I finally dared to move, I reached for Ernest's ring on the nightstand and clenched it in my fist. I didn't cry this time. I couldn't. All I could think was, they knew I was on to them. The mask I'd been wearing was starting to crack, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep pretending. I turned off the lamp and lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to every sound in the house. I wasn't just uncovering the truth anymore. I was being watched. The courtroom smelled faintly of wood polish and stale coffee, like every story of grief that ever sat waiting for judgment. I stood near the front, clutching Ernest's wedding ring in my palm, hidden from sight. When the prosecutor asked me to take my seat, my knees almost buckled. Charles and Henry were already there, handcuffed, heads down. "My sons, my boys," the officer's voice echoed as he read the charges. Premeditated murder, fraud, conspiracy. I looked down at my hands, afraid to look up again. Charles shifted in his chair. "Mom," he whispered, almost pleading. "You don't believe this, do you?" I didn't answer. My throat closed around the words. Henry turned toward me, eyes red. "Please, Mom. It wasn't supposed to happen like that." "Enough," the guard said, stepping forward. The prosecutor stood. "Your Honor, the evidence we'll present will speak for itself." The defense lawyer muttered something about circumstantial proof, but it didn't matter. I already knew what was coming. When they played Ernest's voice, the room fell completely silent. "If you're hearing this, Margot," his voice said through the speakers, calm and steady, "then they've done it." I found the signatures. I know the policy's been changed. They want everything, even if it means taking me out of the picture. Someone in the back gasped. My heart cracked open. Then came another voice, Charles's. "You don't get it, Dad. We're drowning." "It's one policy. You'll be fine." "Fine?" Ernest's voice rose, hurt more than angry. "You forged my name." "You're old," Henry said then, his tone sharp. "You wouldn't even notice if we didn't tell you." And then laughter. Their laughter. The sound pierced through me like a blade. The judge held up a hand. "Continue the playback." Next came the footage from Victor's camera. Henry sneaking into my study, searching through drawers, the glint of Ernest's ring in his hand. The timestamps, the stolen documents, every movement captured with quiet betrayal. Charles's lawyer objected, claiming manipulation. The judge overruled him. I wanted to stand and scream, to ask them why, but I couldn't move. My voice was trapped somewhere between heartbreak and disbelief. The prosecutor turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is not speculation. This is confession captured in their own words." Charles clenched his fists. "That recording's out of context." He shouted. The judge's gavel slammed down. "Mr. Callahan, you will remain silent." Henry buried his face in his hands. "Please," he muttered, voice trembling. "Please stop the tape." But it kept playing. Ernest's final words filled the room. "If they're willing to hurt me, Margot might be next. Tell her to trust no one." My breath caught. That was the message. The one from the funeral. Tears spilled before I could stop them. When the playback ended, the prosecutor rested his case. The judge nodded, then turned to the defense. Do you wish to proceed? Their lawyer stood, pale and sweating. Your Honor, my clients maintain their innocence. They were manipulated by outside pressures. Debt? Desperation? Charles interrupted him. This wasn't my idea, he shouted, pointing at Henry. He's the one who— Don't! Henry yelled, standing suddenly. You think I'd have done this without you? You planned everything. The guards stepped forward, forcing them back into their seats. Their shouting echoed through the courtroom. Brother against brother, fear against guilt. I wanted to close my eyes, but I couldn't. The mother in me needed to see it, the final unraveling of what used to be my family. The judge sighed deeply. Enough. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of every truth we'd heard. This court finds Charles and Henry Callahan guilty of premeditated murder in the death of their father, Ernest Callahan. A hush fell. I heard someone cry, maybe me. Charles froze. Henry let out a sound between a sob and a scream. No, 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 Henry cried, turning to me. Mom, I didn't mean for it to go this far. I swear I didn't want him dead. Charles's face went red. Don't you dare act innocent now. You're the one who poisoned him. The judge struck the gavel again. Order! The guards moved in to separate them, but Henry was still shouting, tears streaking his face. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mom. Please, say something. I tried to stand, but my legs wouldn't listen. I could only whisper, You killed your father. He shook his head violently. No, it wasn't supposed to happen. Charles turned toward me then, eyes hollow. You think you're getting justice, Mom? You lost us too. He was right, I had. When the verdict was finalized, they led them away in cuffs. Henry sobbed. Charles stared ahead like the world had already ended. I didn't follow them with my eyes. I looked down at Ernest's ring in my hand, the last piece of him that still felt real. After the sentencing, Victor met me outside the courthouse. The winter wind bit at our faces. You did it, he said quietly. Justice is served. Justice, I repeated, tasting the word. It feels like punishment. He nodded slowly. It usually does. I watched the police van pull away. Inside were the two boys I'd raised, the ones who used to fight over toy cars and laugh at bedtime stories. Now they were men in handcuffs bound for separate cells. Victor placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. Ernest would be proud of your strength. I turned toward him. He'd rather have his sons. We stood there for a while, watching the snow start to fall, quiet, slow, merciless. That night, I sat alone at Ernest's desk, listening to the echo of his recorded voice one last time. If you're hearing this, Margot, I'm sorry. I should have protected you better. I whispered back. You did. I wanted to believe it. But the truth was, the justice I fought for had taken everything I had left. The house was silent, but it didn't feel like peace. It felt like aftermath. I poured myself a cup of tea, but it went cold before I touched it. On the wall above the fireplace, our family photo still hung. Ernest's hand on my shoulder, Charles and Henry smiling beside him. I stood there for a long time, staring at that frozen version of us. The one before money, before lies, before everything fell apart. In the background, the clock ticked softly. The world kept moving, but I stayed still. I'd won justice for Ernest, yet I couldn't escape the truth whispering through the empty house, that I'd lost every piece of my family to the same darkness that killed him. I picked up Ernest's ring, slipped it onto a chain, and whispered, We got them, love. But at what cost? The question lingered, heavier than the silence itself. The garden looked alive again. The same one Ernest used to tend every Sunday morning, whistling off key while pretending not to mind the weeds. Now, a year later, those same roses bloomed brighter than before, as if they too had survived something. I knelt by the soil, brushing dirt off my gloves. The air smelled of mint and rain. For the first time in a long while, I could breathe without the weight of the past pressing on my chest. The sound of gravel crunching under tires pulled me back. Victor's car stopped by the gate, and his familiar calm voice called out, You've been busy. I stood smiling faintly. Someone had to keep the garden from forgetting him. He joined me by the rose bushes, his hands in his coat pockets. You did more than keep it alive. It's beautiful. It's his garden, I said quietly. I'm just keeping his promise. Victor looked around, nodding. You've come a long way, Margot. I laughed softly. You mean I'm not jumping at every sound anymore? He smiled. That too. But I meant it. You're different. Stronger. I had to be, I said, brushing soil from my fingers. After the trial, after losing both of them, I didn't think I'd ever find solid ground again. You did, he said. You built it yourself. We sat on the porch, the same spot where Ernest and I used to drink tea when the evenings were long and kind. I poured 2 cups, the steam curling in the cool air. Victor watched the garden, his voice gentle. You know, a lot of people would have given up. I wanted to, I admitted. Many times. He looked at me. So what stopped you? I paused, staring at the teacup in my hands. His message, that day at the funeral. I am still alive. Trust no one. For the longest time, I thought it was literal. Like he was out there, waiting to be found. But maybe it meant something else. Like what? That a part of him was still alive in me, I said softly. The part that refused to be silent. Victor nodded slowly. You did what most people couldn't. You turned pain into purpose. I'm trying, I said. After the verdict, there were letters. From other women, people who'd been hurt, lied to, silenced. I started meeting them, talking with them. Helping them, he said. Maybe, I said. I just know I can't unsee what I've seen. I can't pretend evil doesn't wear familiar faces. Victor leaned back in his chair, a quiet smile tugging at his mouth. You sound like Ernest. That caught me off guard. Do I? He once told me, Victor said, that truth isn't about being right. It's about having the courage to face what hurts. You've done that. I felt my throat tighten, but this time it wasn't grief. It was gratitude, raw and warm. He always said things like that, I murmured, even when I didn't want to hear them. Victor chuckled. That's love for you, stubborn and inconvenient. We sat in silence for a while, watching the sky turn the color of peaches and fire. The world felt still, like it was waiting for something gentle. After a moment I said, You never told me why you stayed after the trial. You could have gone back to the city. He shrugged. I didn't want to leave you alone. I smiled faintly. You didn't have to stay, Victor. I know, he said quietly, but sometimes staying is the right thing to do. There was no need to answer. I just looked at him, and for the first time in years, the silence between me and another person didn't feel heavy. The wind rustled through the garden, and somewhere in the distance, a bird sang. It felt like Ernest's kind of evening, calm, patient, healing. When Victor stood to leave, he said, You'll be all right now, won't you? I think so, I said. For the first time, I actually believe it. He nodded. Call me if you need anything. I will. He smiled once more before walking down the path, his figure fading behind the old oak trees. I stayed on the porch until the sky turned silver. Then I went inside, the house quiet but not empty. Every corner still held Ernest's memory, not like a wound, but like a whisper of who we were. I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window. The clock ticked softly. Everything felt slower now, like life was finally letting me catch up. When I picked up my phone, I noticed an old notification buried deep in the archives. My heart skipped as I opened it. The first message, I am still alive. Trust no one. For a long time, I just stared at it, the same words that had once shattered me. But now they didn't hurt. They made me smile. Maybe Ernest's soul had found a way to guide me, not through miracles or ghosts, but through courage. Through love that refused to die with him, I whispered to the quiet room, You did it, Ernest. You saved me. The message stayed on the screen for a while before it dimmed. I locked the phone, set it aside, and looked out at the garden one more time. The moonlight touched the roses, making them shimmer like small lanterns. I felt him there, not as a voice, not as a ghost, but as peace. I took off the chain around my neck, the one holding his wedding ring, and pressed it gently into the soil beside the first rose bush. You can rest now, I said. We both can. The wind moved softly through the garden, almost like a reply. For the first time since that awful day at the funeral, I didn't feel haunted. I felt whole. If you were in my place that day, standing at a graveside, holding a phone that whispered, I am still alive, would you have believed it? Or dismissed it as the desperate voice of grief? Sometimes the truth hides behind the impossible, waiting for courage to uncover it. What would you have done? Trusted your instincts, or buried the question forever? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to know how you see it. And don't forget to subscribe for more emotional, true life stories that remind us how fragile and powerful truth can be.